Hello everybody, Mealworm here. I'm going to go ahead and make this video as kind of my my last hurrah for Eve Echoes. After this video posts and I get it up onto my Discord, I'm going to be making a formal exit from the game. I haven't actually played the thing in almost a year at this point, so I figured it's time to stop leaving everybody hanging and try to provide as much knowledge and information as I can on my way out. This video, essentially, I'm going to go through the Mealworms industry calculator and give essentially a top level view of everything that the sheet does and a little bit on how it works, as well as some tips and tricks for the people out there that want to continue it on their own or even create their own calculators. I'm completely self-taught, so it is possible. People got a good head on their shoulders, then they should be more than capable to at least do some basic calculators here in Google Sheets. Let's get rolling here. Let's click in here. Now, there are tons and tons of sheets, so I'm going to blaze through a couple of them because a lot of them really are very, very similar, and I'll spend more time on a few and point out some of the pain points and parts that gave me some serious grief. Now, my calculator has 29 sheets, 27 if you take away the home and the changelog sheet because those are just there, but that's essentially a lot of data. And the sheets really go into three different categories, and I'll call them background sheets, data sets, and the actual calculators itself. The background sheets we're going to go through first, and in case anyone didn't know, sheets can be hidden. If we do right click hide sheet, it will take it away from this drop bar, but it will still show up here and it'll just be faded out. If you click on it, it comes right back. So that's how the hidden sheets work. If you're sharing this, I recommend hiding everything that's not important or that's going to be interacted with, just for clarity, and so no one ends up in the background here and just like breaks a bunch of stuff. But the very first one is the Eve Echoes data. This is just doing that import data command to get the Eve Echoes data. You can do this. You can manually input prices. You can use the compendium data. It's just some way to pull the market data into the sheet to be used everywhere else. It's not necessarily required for everything. Mostly it was just for mineral prices, PI, ores, and blueprints if you're a ship builder or a structure builder, component builder, essentially. So that's what this sheet is. The skills sheet is kind of just my catch-all for when I need to be making background processes. I have a bunch of what I call skill arrays here, and they are the amount boosts that you get for each level: basic, advanced, and expert 1 through 5. So these will basically just always live here, and all of the other sheets will reference them, and you'll see this is the actual. So here's like the frigates, destroyers, cruisers. So that's how that works. I recommend having a sheet like this just to have all of your background formulas running, just to declutter the actual calculator sheet itself, so you don't have any duplicate data or erroneous information on it, and it's only the information you need to see. And those are basically the sheets for everything else. Everything else happens in formula in sheets. There's a little bit that happens inside the data sets just for ease of use personally, so I'm not duplicating data over and over and making the sheet massive and slow. Changelog and home are just basically what it says there. It's just you've all seen these sheets. They're not important. I will say though, these hyperlinks inside the sheets are super fun. If you haven't actually clicked in and looked at them, they are just hyperlinks. So the hyperlink formula, the first quotation is the link to go to. The second quotation is what it says. And you can link inside of a sheet using the GID of it. And every page has a GID. So in this case, it's pointing to ships. you would just take this GID right here and copy it into right there, GID. So that's really fun. ZGod, I got this from ZGod because his sheet is like a billion different tabs of things. So you can even add icons to your sheets if you want just a little bit more of the pop, which is always fun. The other thing too is the market data. By default, I don't think anyone's actually going to use this to its full extent anymore. This calculator was originally built for a one-size-fits-all in-house corp and alliance builder, which is why there's MSRP, price to sell, and at cost, which is price that you're buying materials at. This was just to work on profit margins and SRP pricing and all of that stuff. But it's technically you can just skip the whole thing. But what you do need is at least one set of data for this stuff here. You could actually even skip data cores and salvage materials if you want. The big thing is planetary and minerals, because that's where most of the use of this sheet is in the building side of things, and that's what it's going to be using. These are just pulling from, they're using a VLOOKUP for Iveco's data and doing that. Now, if you're going to be recreating this from scratch, I recommend using the index match functions. That is going to make the sheet a lot quicker. I don't think I was working on doing index match in the 2.0, and then I just burnt to the ground, and now I'm quitting. But doing a quick Google search on index match will probably end you up at the same article that I found that taught me how to do it. So I recommend going and doing index matches, but by default you need at least one set of data, and in this case it's the Eve Echoes market data. Those are all of the background sheets that do, all of the updating and whatnot. The other sheets are going to be the back half of the list here, and it's essentially just static data. Blueprints, so many freaking blueprints. The reason there are so many different sheets is the blueprints really do need to be, the blueprints and the calculators, they need to be broken up into sections of like materials, just because you'd have to make a calculator that shows every single type of material that will flex based on what you're building. It's so much easier just to make one for ships, make one for outposts and structures, make one for capitals. That way the data is not too large and too long, because the capitals, they need capital components, and the ships just need raw minerals. So that's why they're all broken up. Most of the blueprint data is going to be pretty complete. The BP blueprint is for the making the reverse engineering the blueprints out of them. So that should be full. The rigs do not have the capital rigs. Modules and drones and ships, outposts, cap ships and components, and structures. These should all be complete. So if you even just wanted to come into this sheet, find what you want, you can right click and you can copy to a new spreadsheet if it's yours. If you have another spreadsheet, you can make a new spreadsheet from it, or do existing spreadsheet and just pull the whole tab in and then just steal my data. I got most of this data by grabbing it from other people's sheets. The community was super helpful in collecting data for me as well, so that was huge. But so that's how those work, and it's basically just all static data that just lives here. And that's basically all that these are for all of these blueprints. I will say though, if you're collecting this data, or you get data and you're verifying it, please get this data at 100% efficiency, or as close as possible. The game does not show that information very freely, so you can skill up to get to 100% and work it from there. Or in some cases where I collected the data at multiple percentage points, added and averaged them out, that got most of this data within 1 to 2 minerals of variance, and I consider that within margin of error. No one's going to cry over 100 extra ISK because there was an extra Zydrine, so that's how that's going to work. The exception are the capitals and the structures, because they use components and use them in very, very few quantities. So the difference between 4 hanger arrays and 5 hanger arrays is going to be a couple million in build fees and material costs, and even just using up the slot in your building menu. So that data needs to be at 100 or as close to it. So then that's all the background data. We'll chunk through the calculators now, and this is gonna get a little messy. I'm gonna pre-apologize before we get into this, and we're gonna start with the ships one. This one is probably the most feature rich, but it also has the most garbage on it, and we'll go through this really, really quickly. Now, if you're going to be building a calculator, or you want to reverse engineer a calculator, there are, other than using index match, the other big thing that is very important to use, not necessarily very important, but will make your life a lot easier in supporting the sheet and updating, is using named ranges. So under data, there are named ranges. Named ranges are huge because it allows you, in a situation like in this case, the sheet is going to be looking for a manticore, and you'll see it just says ship blueprints here. That saves the time of going in, and select, click and dragging the whole. Actually, I should probably look at ship blueprint. There it is. Clicking and dragging the whole selection, but it also makes it so that you can dynamically update it. If a new ship gets added, you can add it to the sheet, increase the size of the ship blueprint array here, or range rather, and boom, you're done. That's all it takes. Everything in your calculator that references ship blueprints will then start using the extra information that you've just added. So do yourself a favor and do that, especially with large data sets like this. And so those are the inner workings. Let's go through what this sheet actually does. The production skills, so it's color coded, so this will help me and you and everyone who's using this. So you're going to want to fill in these skills here. This is super easy to do with these drop downs. They changed it, so it's under view more cell actions, but it's just here under data validation. And you'll see it's just a list. Pick 0 through 5, and they're all like that. You can, if you make a cell with data validation, you can copy and paste it, and it'll keep its data validation. So you don't have to do like 90 clicks every time. You can make one and then just copy and paste it all the way down. Super, super helpful. All of these will point to where we were earlier in the skills sheet. So it's basically just doing VLOOKUPs. So it's grabbing the cell for the level. So you see it's basic level 5, and it's going to grab it from building values here, and it's going to grab from the basic line. And this is, you'll see D5 and D6 for advanced and expert. And so those are all here, and then it adds it together. One thing this sheet does not have are the decryptors, but those are pretty easy to do. You can list all the decryptors and their efficiency values, and then basically just do the same thing, add a VLOOKUP to the decryptor value and add it to that final sum, and then that final sum will show up under these. And so it's basically an exact copy of all of these, just for different sections. And then all of the gray will essentially fill in automatically. So once you get that final number, that sum, you want to do 150 minus that. I don't know why the game does it that way. It's just what happens. That being said, it's important to keep these in percentage, because you'll see here we're actually going to be multiplying our values by this, and it has to maintain percentage, otherwise it's going, because if this wasn't a percentage, it would be multiplying the cost of this by 95 instead of multiplying it by 0.95. So if you're getting weird data, make sure that you're formatting as percentage. Another thing that I really like to do, because um, the default percentage always has 2 decimal points, but since this game doesn't use decimals, I just take off the extra, the ending zeros. Makes everything nice and clean. This information is going to automatically pull from that blueprint sheet. You'll see it just looks for the ship, grabs the second row, which will say frigate or cruiser, battle cruiser, what have you. Same with the tech level. It's not necessarily important for building unless you're using a low-level account or you're giving a ship to a low-level account. So it's just kind of a sanity check. Then the material efficiency, what this is going to do is it's going to use this ship type to grab the correct material efficiency, and then whatever is in this cell is what's getting multiplied across for the whole recipe. The recipe is super easy. You can get rid of these if statements because I added these checkboxes. I deeply regret doing that because doing if statements gets crazy, and you'll see later we'll get like, let me see, I've got like a quadruple nested if statement. It was absolute ass. Don't do that. But essentially what this is going to do is it's going to look for the Manticore 2 in our ship blueprints. It's going to grab column 4, which is titanium, and it's going to multiply it by the efficiency. And that's basically it. It'll do that all the way down here. If you're doing this, make sure you add round up, because the game rounds up for all values, and make sure that you add false between any H lookup or V lookup. You have to add false because that is the trigger or the call that tells Google if the items are already in sequential or alphabetical order. Because none of this is, you have to do false, otherwise there is a margin where you might get a bellicose covert ops instead of just the regular belly and things like that. So just make sure you add false to everything. That basically goes all the way down to get all of the different materials that it needs. The amount total is just however much this is, because it's already taking your efficiency into account, times your quantity. And then the cost is, look at this ugly triple nested if statement. Don't do this, everybody. Just use one set of data. It's basically just asking, if MSRP is selected, then use the MSRP costs. It's total garbage. But it's basically just this times the price. Super easy to do. And then those are all added up here. Blueprint was garbage. It basically is, you'll see more nested if statements. It's basically, by default, it's just going to go to the Eve Echoes data and grab whatever the price is for the blueprint. There's a check mark for a blueprint price override to use this, and there's even a whole nother drop down for yes and no to make it 0. I would have just gotten rid of this whole thing. Just override to 0 if you don't need a blueprint, for Christ's sake. I don't know. I had a problem of over-engineering, as you can all see. Contract taxing and commission fees. Basically, contract tax, if you do yes, it just adds 8% essentially. We'll do that no, and then commission fee is just a percentage bonus. Super easy to do, but you can completely disregard that. Other prices, don't even look at this. This was for when the game first came out last summer. There was, or last summer, 2 summers ago, Christ almighty, there was such volatility in the market that we, as a corporation, I wanted to implement some sort of fair market pricing, especially because a lot of it was internal order at the time. So you can just disregard this. It's essentially just how much Eve Echoes market is selling, but 85% of it. Profit breakdowns, you can just disregard these two. This was if you were using MSRP. Essentially, it's if you're going to buy materials and then sell them for profit. But that's basically how this whole sheet works. Pretty much all of the other building sheets are going to work in the same vein. Capital ships is something a little bit special because, one, it came with its own set of skills, so I had to I had to find those percentages. So just know it's not always a one size fits all. This gave me a lot of grief right when it came out. The other thing too is the capital ships use components, and so everything happens first here, where it looks for the actual ship itself and then multiplies it by the efficiency. And then in the actual blueprint sheet for the capital components, nope, that was capital ships. There we go. You'll see here's all of the main data is here. And then this is for that capital building, where it's essentially just the actual, it's the required items times however much it needed, and then added into the sheet. No, I didn't want to add a sheet. Yeah, I know. Let's go back. Capital ships. So then this is how much titanium it's going to cost for everything. It sums the whole titanium row. And it does that for all of the materials here. Then it's basically the ship manufacturer fee is on the capital ship blueprint page. The components are super easy because it's like 1.5 mil for each. Component blueprints are I think it's like 3 mil each, and then just additions in. That's basically it. The outposts and the structures, or the outpost really works in the same way, where it takes the actual structures and multiplies it across, and then everything else essentially just worked off of that same thing. And I have somebody at the door, so I will be right back. Alrighty. Sorry about that. So the all of the other building sheets essentially work in the same exact vein. The capital components just says, okay, here's the capital component, multiply it by the efficiency, add it all up together. Mods and drones, same sort of way. This one was kind of fun because like the drones and stuff will have multiple items after you're done building them, so it was fun working on those. But works in that same way. Looks for the item, pulls how much it needs times your efficiency, and then multiplies it by cost, and then adds it all up there at the end. And all of those are pretty much working just fine. Rigs, I don't think anybody actually used this, but this just points to points to the rig blueprints page and tells you how much it needs and then the cost. This one kind of sucked because the cost, everybody knows the cost in rigs is in the blueprint. It's not in the the charred micro circuits or whatever. Outposts. Oh, one thing to note is you'll see like in the outpost one, it has the actual outpost, but it also has all of the building things, and that is because they use the same items. So the tech center uses the same structure pieces. The space lab uses the same structure pieces. So using the named ranges, it was super easy just to plunk the data in, update the named range, and then just update the data validation to include the new columns. And that's basically all it took to upgrade this sheet with all of the new stuff that they added. That being said, it's always best to verify your data because I ran into issues with that. But that's such is the life of a Google Sheets engineer. Let's see, structures, same exact thing. Since the structures only these are like if you needed to build like a specific one of these, or if you're breaking these up within your corp, like okay, you build all of the storage bays and all of the docking bays, and you build all the flight hangars. This is what this is for, but I don't think anybody actually used this. Reverse engineering. I don't know if anybody used this either. Honestly, I think most people just use it for the ships. But this one was super messy, and I can show you how, or rather why that is. So because the market data has has essentially every single thing in here, but when I first made this, the faction recs weren't at all. So I had to make this whole section of override. I would just either take this and try to, there's not even, actually, you know what, just delete this whole thing. It's not super useful anymore. And part of the reason is here's all of the items that could be used, essentially all of the different cores and then all of the ship debris. And to make a calculator that looks like the ship's one, it would have to be that long, like 50 cells long. So basically what I did is this is essentially an HLOOKUP for that sheet, and it pulls its information from, I always click that, that's ridiculous. It pulls it from BPBP, blueprint, and you'll see it's got all of the ships in here. And I intentionally left blank space here instead of using zeros because, because then I have what here is a query where it essentially says take all of this and delete all of the rows where the S column is blank, or keep everything where there is information in the S column, and that gives you the 4 that you need right here: the manufacturing, the 2 cores, and the type of wreck. So I mean, you really could actually just take this and build off of it for the new ships if you would like. I had started doing the capitals, but it was just it was a little too much to take on. So let's go back to the reverse engineering, and you'll see that here. The debris price override is kind of messy to do. And let's see here. There we go. Cost total. So essentially, if the debris price override is on, then it's just going to use these, and that's basically all that there is to it. Let's see here. Module repro. This is just basically a dirty drop down. There is the repro values sheet. This sheet is not complete. I can tell you that right now, especially with dead space stuff, adding a whole nother level of reprocessing stuff. That's not even in this calculator anywhere. But this is like if you're gonna repro like your normal like mark gear and like your low level, not even faction stuff, but like your green loot and shit, and how much you're going to get out of it. But the calculator itself is essentially just a dirty drop down. You know, here's how much you're going to get from the repro times your efficiency for it, and then it'll add up the prices up for you. So it's like, okay, sure, this medium rifle railgun will get me 44k and stuff, and honestly most of that is going to be in titanium and pyrite, so it's useless. But that's how that one works. It's just it's a drop down for the entire top row, and then this weird stuff that was data mined in Chinese, and then shows it across. Super easy to do, but not terribly important. One thing that I did have to do, and I will show you if we go to repro values, I added none, and I had to add it to the top, and I put zeros across it so that you could actually reset the sheet, because I was running into issues where once you had selected something, you couldn't go back to zeros. So add a none if you're going to be doing something like this. Just a pro tip from Mealworm there. Or reprocessing. This is a calculator that's probably older than the official release of the game, to be perfectly honest. But it's super simple. It uses background data for the ore values here, and essentially just works off of that, and that's all it's ever really going to need. It'll take your skills into account and then multiply it across. Now this does have what's called a floor value on it, so it's going to round down to the nearest 100, and that is because you repro in quantities of 100. So if I were to say that I have 120 Veldspar, it's not going to take into account that there's going to be 20 Veldspar left over. So it's just pure output. This section down here is just static data it's not technically static, it's just informational data that will update dynamically based on your repro skills here. This is really just good for guesstimating how much you're going to get out of things, or if you know that it's like, oh, okay, I need to go get a bunch of mechs, but I also need a little bit of ISO. It's like, okay, well, let's take a look and see what is going to work out the best, and obviously it'll be Neeson's spot. So that's how this one works. It's super colorful. I had a ton of fun making all the pretty colors with it, so feel free to steal this. And then let's see here, compression. I don't think anybody even uses this. I just made this as a pet project because I had the data for it. Essentially, you just put in your skills, and you'll see it's on that skills sheet, and then it'll tell you how much it's gonna, how many gigajoules it will take to compress it, and then this will tell you, based on the prices, what the cheapest thing to be. So, like, if you could buy 375 heavy water, you can do that. And let me see your profit calculator. I don't think anybody uses this either. I used this a lot right at the beginning when the market was volatile enough to make really, really good flips. That being said, I'll just go through it really quick. Input your broker's fee and your transaction fee, or transaction tax, technically it's called. And this basically is going to tell you how much you'll lose when you're making those buys and sells. Essentially, let's say we're going to buy something at $1 million and I'm buying one. The direct market or the buy order is very, very different, because if you do a buy order, the broker fee takes into effect. If you buy it directly from the market, you do not pay a broker fee. So that's one thing. Then, if you're going to go and you're going to sell it, you can, if you do sell now, that will sell to an open buy order that somebody has. And if you do direct market, then that's placing the order, and the direct market will also incur a broker fee. And so in this case, this will say, let's say we bought something outright for 1 mil, and if somebody is buying it for 1.17, then that is your break-even prices. And this is essentially the breakdown, showing that it's even. This whole thing is the price override. If you're going to, like, let's say I bought this at 1 mil and I'm going to sell it for 1.5 mil, then it'll tell you, okay, your profit's actually going to be this. So that's what the profit calculator is for. Debris calculator, this is just like a really nasty array. It's going to tell you how much of your little rig bits you'll get. So that's kind of it. I don't think this data is actually valid anymore. I don't know. I haven't tested it. No one's even used it enough to tell me that it's wrong. But that's how that is. And that's essentially everything that exists here within my calculator. Now, I do apologize. I talk very quickly, but you can skip through and rewatch what you need to. You can watch on 0.75 if you really like. I actually don't know what my voice sounds like at 0.75, so somebody let me know how weird I sound. That being said as well, if you have questions or you want to, bounce some ideas, feel free to join my Discord. I'll have a link for it somewhere, I think. And we can continue conversations there. But at this point, this is basically the last update I'm ever going to do for this calculator. I don't necessarily play this game anymore, but the time that I've spent with this community has been absolutely phenomenal. So I do thank everyone for the time and effort that they put in, all of the help that they've had. I had a blast playing the game. It just doesn't really have a place to fit in my life anymore. As sad as it is to say, though, I'll miss quite a few of you crazy nut jobs out there. Anyways, this has been Mealworm, and I will see you all out in space.